Hello, my friends, and welcome back to the Fertility Confidence Podcast. I was putting some finishing touches. I'm actually recording this on a Sunday. Usually I don't sit down on my desk on Sundays, but I had a bit of a slower week last week. Kids are one's outside, one's at a play date. So I was like, now is the time. I have to get some focused work done. But I was putting the finishing touches on our His Confidence Male Fertility program that is officially starting as a part of the His and Her bundle we currently have running tomorrow. That will be January 15th for those of you who are curious. Super excited about that. And if you did not get into this live version of His Confidence, never fear. It is going to be coming back. The doors will reopen after this first iteration. And if you head over to Instagram, find me at Fertility Confidence Method. If you don't already follow me, hit that follow button so you don't miss out on any great content or when we release new podcast episodes. And then I want you to DM me the word SNEAK, SNEAK, and that is going to put you on our first to know sneak peek insiders email list. And when we pull His Confidence back out and launch it, I guess, again later this year, you will be the first to know. And by joining the sneak peek list, you will actually be able to grab that male fertility program at a steep discounted rate. So you're going to want to head to Instagram at Fertility Confidence Method, give me a follow, and then DM me the word SNEAK. And you'll be the first to know, not just when we launch His Confidence again, but any of our amazing upcoming and revamped programs that are coming your way in 2024. You're going to want to get on that sneak peek insider list. But enough about that. Here's the cool thing. So I was putting the finishing touches on the His Confidence. Part of that is we're talking about modifiable risk factors for lowered male fertility. And one of the things that comes up inside Fertility Confidence Method quite a bit, like I would say at least weekly, is heat. How does heat impact male and also female fertility? And spoiler alert, we actually don't really have the research in female fertility. If you have some, send her my way. It's something I'm also very curious about because I'm constantly asked for women about like saunas and cold plunging, which is such like a hot topic right now, even obviously not having to do with heat, but often they go hand in hand, or going in hot tubs and things for women. But we also get that question a lot with men because we hear that hot tubs are bad for fertility. But why? The reason we might read about that or hear about that on the internet at the surface level is they're just saying heat is bad. But I wanted to dig a little bit deeper into and explain for the men who are doing His Confidence with me this week, why is heat bad? And is there a threshold? Is there a temperature that we just like don't want to surpass, a length of time we don't want to surpass? Like, what are all the deets? And I found some really interesting numbers from the research that I decided I just could not gatekeep, okay? These are things that we're putting in our paid program, but I really, really felt very strongly that this was important information for everybody, just simply because we get asked this question all the friggin' time. So when it comes to heat, okay, it's not just about body temperature. It's actually about scrotal temperature. Now, before I hit record, I was sitting here thinking to myself, like, am I going to, give this 10-minute spiel on why heat is bad, give a bunch of temperatures, and then what? Like, are men going to have to buy those infrared, like, forehead thermometers to, like, check the temperature of their balls? I don't think so, but, like, I guess we could go that far and actually say, like, we could legitimately track the temperature of your scrotum and know what activities are raising that temperature too high. I just got lots of funny thoughts when I was going through it. I'm like, do I is this something I maybe need to enlist Tyler in a little like experimentation? And he's going to be editing this episode going, oh dear God, what is my wife doing now? But it's all in the name of science, babe. If you're listening to this, I do think it would be really fascinating to know, like, it's important information. So what basically happens when the scrotal temperature increases too much, the general premise is cellular apoptosis. Apoptosis is basically, I think about it from like when we learned about biology, even in high school, like explosion. That's how I always remembered. Apoptosis equals death, okay? So basically the higher temperature in the scrotum, it impacts the plasma membrane of the cells that are making the sperm and impacts the sperm itself. So the little teensy, men are constantly making sperm all the time. They're called little teensy spermatotids when they're immature. And when heat gets too high in their home in which they are being created, they die. Therefore, there's less sperm to mature and actually finish the process of meiosis or mitosis. Can't remember off the top of my head right now, but not bothered by that. The process of spermatogenesis, actually making the sperm. There's going to be less immature spermatotids available to finish the process. Therefore, lower counts, okay? The other interesting thing that I found out in my heat research was that there's a higher risk of DNA fragmentation in men who've had higher scrotal temperatures. They didn't really get into like length of time and yada yada, which obviously would be ideal to know from a threshold perspective. So like the research needs to be continued for sure. It's not perfect, but higher risk of DNA fragmentation. When we're talking about DNA fragmentation, in fact, if you go back to episode, which one is it? Let me scroll on my little sheet I have here because I do have it written down. Episode 62, we talk about needing more than just a semen analysis. And that's where we speak a little bit to DNA fragmentation, which is essentially the health of the DNA inside the sperm. So a semen analysis doesn't give us all the information. A semen analysis tells us the count, the motility, the basic morphology, which is like the shape of the head and the tail and how they connect, but it doesn't actually tell us about the genetic material. It doesn't tell us about the DNA capability of that sperm. And when DNA fragmentation is high, we have less genetically capable sperm to make an embryo. So we want that number to be lower. So heat exposure increases DNA fragmentation, meaning there's not only less sperm being made, but the sperm that are there are going to be of a lesser quality, poor DNA. So if that sperm with a higher frag rate actually is the one that fertilizes the egg, it's very highly likely that there isn't going to be a compatible that is so not a word, compatible genetic makeup in that embryo to sustain a pregnancy, essentially. Heat is bad, okay? That's kind of what we learned from the internet. But what does that actually mean? And so I was able to find some numbers. Men, I love you all dearly. Y'all also love numbers, right? That's why I spent so much time inside His Confidence pulling research studies for you, pulling stats, pulling numbers, showing you those things. And it's important. It's important for women too, but men have that more like analytical sort of style of learning and processing, and that's part of the reason. Why? We want to see the numbers. So the cool thing I found was just an increase of 1 degree Celsius, like barely anything, actually decreases spermatogenesis by 14%. So spermatogenesis is the process in which the testes make sperm. So we're decreasing the body's capacity to do that. Remember, in men, it's happening all the time. So in theory, a little bit of heat is going to slow that process down. You're going to be removed from the heat source. Temperature is going to go back to baseline. Spermatogenesis should return back to normal. So we're looking at more acute, like in the moment impacts and issues Obviously, if you're someone who has like a very highly active, physically active job where you're just like hot and sweaty all day long, we're now prolonging that exposure. We're now shutting down spermatogenesis for a significantly longer time. So we need to be thinking about these things when we're having conversations about modifiable risk factors when it comes to sperm health. So you want to start tracking your BBT, but all of the rules feel maybe just a little bit difficult. Or maybe you've actually already tried your oral BBT tracking and you are constantly forgetting to take your temperature. Your charts are super hard to interpret because your temps are all over the place and you're feeling like maybe this is actually adding stress into your journey. I felt the exact same way when I started using BBT tracking for my own fertility journey, and I actually remember when my partner and I went backwoods camping and he could not stop laughing because I still packed my little pink thermometer in my backpack, but I was super dedicated, so dedicated that it actually started to impact my sleep. So when I heard about Tempdrop, I was instantly curious, and after over 2 years of using the device personally, I will never pick up an oral BBT thermometer again. Tempdrop is a wearable arm device that continuously tracks your temperature during your sleep and provides you with the most accurate basal body temperature through its advanced sensors and sophisticated algorithms. No more waking up at the same time every morning. No more worrying about waking up in the night. No more forgotten temps messing with your chart. Tempdrop literally eliminates all of the complicated rules of oral BBT temping and lets you have an accurate fertility tracker without all the added stress. Tempdrop can be used if you're a restless sleeper, a night shift worker, have long or irregular cycles, or maybe you're up nursing or up with your kids and still actually have the peace of mind that the data is being collected. I am obsessed with my Tempdrop and how easy it is to chart my cycle now. So I am super thrilled to offer you guys, my podcast community, a 12% discount on your Tempdrop device using the code KelseyTD, and you can combine this with any current promotion that the company is having. The other piece of information that I found that was interesting was actual maximum temperature sensitivity. So there's different kinds of cells and genetic material, obviously, inside those cells. And so there seems to be a range based on like when DNA and RNA are impacted and like the plasma membrane and all these crazy things that we just simply don't need to go into that much detail. So the range we found was about 31 to 40 degrees Celsius. And when we think about body temperature is around 37 degrees Celsius. Like core body temperature is around 37 degrees Celsius. And so we have about a 3 degrees Celsius buffer there before we're seeing DNA damage. I don't have a scrotum. I feel comfortable sharing that. So I don't really know, like on a personal level, what is that temperature piece away from like the core body? You know, there's separation from your body, but then you're wearing tight underwear. There's friction and things. When you're sitting, that's obviously different from when you're standing. And we're going to get to that little fun fact in a second. There's a lot of varying factors that are going to impact a fluctuation of temperature. So there is a range, okay? There's a fluctuation of temperature. Obviously, I'm not expecting scrotal temperature to really be below body temperature, but we don't want it to ever be more than 40 degrees, I would say, for too long of a time. So something to just kind of think about. And again, are we going to start pulling out our like infrared thermometers? Probably not. But in the name of science, like it might be interesting to know. So there's something that you might want to try on your next like bored Sunday afternoon. The other thing I thought was really interesting because we actually had a client whose husband was doing a very long bicycle race, like right before they were about to do an IUI. It was like a 50-kilometer bike something. And quite literally the thought of doing that makes me gag. But that's just because that's not my jam. That's his jam. That's probably something I assume he thoroughly enjoys 50-kilometer bikes, or else he would not have signed up for that. And at the end of the day, we actually did decide that doing that race like 2 days before IUI was probably not the best idea. we actually do have research showing that men who bicycle excessively through the week have lower sperm parameters. I think there's a huge component of scrotal heat in that and compression, right? And we see in this particular study I was reading this morning that even prolonged driving can increase scrotal temperature. So what they found that after 2 hours of driving, so I'm assuming that's 2 hours without stopping, so 2 hours of driving increased scrotal temperature by just 2 degrees. So when I read that, I thought, interesting. What about truck drivers? What about people who are like driving around for their job constantly? What about men who work at a desk? They're not driving, but they're sitting in a chair and maybe getting up for lunch and not even that. Like when I met Tyler, we worked in the same office. And I swear to you, he would sit in his desk, he would get up for lunch, and that was it. Like he wouldn't even pee during the day because he didn't drink water. He drinks water now, so it would be different. But even here at home, like he will sit for 4 or 5 hours at a time without getting up from his office. I typically can't. I can't sit still that long, but he can. If he's like doing something, he can just sit there. And if we're thinking 2 degrees every 2 hours, if you're someone that's sitting still for 6 hours, like we're now looking at 6-degree temperature fluctuations. That's pretty huge. So something that I think we need to start having conversations with our clients is, and we do this from like a stress perspective, like we know from the research that men and women who work like at a desk and at a computer, taking a break once an hour, even just for 5 minutes, is good for productivity. We see that in the productivity research. But now we can rope this in of like, if you're sitting all day at your desk, your scrotal temperature, regardless if you're wearing loose-fitting boxers or not, is likely an issue. Now, how do we combat that? We stand up. I'm not saying you need to stand up all day, but every hour and a half, you should get up and just like do a lap and like get some airflow and like shake things out a little bit. Let that body temperature, let that scrotal temperature come back down and then sit back down. And I think this is a really good practice for posture as well. It's a really good practice for just sedentary jobs. There's actually another really interesting study that has nothing to do with scrotal heat, but everything to do with physical exercise. And it actually showed that even just getting up from your desk, just standing, from getting up from a sitting position and standing at your desk every hour for a few minutes, increased weight loss and decreased insulin resistance. So there's a lot of good nuggets here to kind of say, like, if you have a sedentary job, there's really easy and highly impactful things we can do through the day to just improve your fertility outcomes, which is so cool. The other piece with scrotal heat that it's still very inconclusive in the research is also like EMF exposure. And so there was one paper that looked at like men who put their laptops on their lap, and they're not entirely positive if it's a heat issue or an EMF exposure issue. The EMF data is very, like, I would say gray right now. Like it's really hard to isolate in a vacuum. It's really hard to say like this is the only thing that's possibly going on. So we know that that's why either positives or negatives are happening. But I do think given the landscape of society right now and you know, like 5G and whatever is going to come after that and all the tech advances, I do think this is an area which we will start to see research coming out. We're just like not super clear on that. But I would say like bare bones basics, no laptops on your lap. Okay, we know those suckers get hot. And so making sure that you're sitting at a proper desk or not having it on the table, not having it on your lap. The other thing that we often will counsel our men on is just like, if you do walk around with your phone in the pocket, back pocket is better. And when you get somewhere you can take it out, take it out. Again, we don't know for sure from an EMF standpoint, like what is the impact there. But the reality is that with an increase in EMF exposure, with an increase in environmental chemical exposure, with an increase of stress in our lives, over the last 50 years, we've seen a huge decline in sperm health. We just don't know for sure exactly what the issue is, My belief, it's probably a combination of all those things, honestly. So really easy peasy to just like limit exposure there, even though we don't have that data specifically. That's a lot of talk about scrotums. Share this with your partner if you're listening along. Hopefully this is helpful for you guys. Like I said, if you haven't joined us in this round of His Confidence, you absolutely can join us again. Just make sure that you get on our sneak peek list to get your exclusive price discount when we do relaunch that program later this year. And all you need to do is find me on Instagram at Fertility Confidence Method and DM me the word sneak, and you will get put on the list. Have a beautiful rest of your day, everybody, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.